when you are working from home.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So first of all, I would like to thank the Chamber of Tax Consultants for giving me this opportunity to share my knowledge on the subject, which will be very important in the coming days because we are in a lockdown stage. And once this lockdown stage is completed, everyone will be busy with the GST audits because the due date for the financial year 18-19 is in June, 30th of June 2020. So there will be a June ki jung, which we say, because all the returns for the month of from the February to May also will be filed in the month of June. And the GST audit and annual return for financial year 18-19 also will be in the month of June. Then there will
Correct.
be statutory audits, etc., and which will have to be completed. All the March closing also, since the offices are shut, all the businesses are also shut, and therefore the March closing work also will be there. So in the month May and June will be a very busy period for every one of us, and I think every one of the participants is a new article. They have joined the CA firms recently, 6 months, or in the last attempt they would have cleared and joined. So for them, this will be a first season for this GST audit and annual return. And it is very important that this is being done. What we say in a proper and an effective manner, and therefore this topic is utmost importance for all the especially the article students, because they are on the ground, they are doing the maximum work, and the principals will rely on their work, and therefore GST audit will be an important exercise which everyone has to do. There are certain council meetings which were held in the past, and therefore there are certain decisions which are impacting the GST audit also, especially with regard to the increase in the threshold limit for GST audit from the 2 crores to the 5 crores. That is something which will impact the MSMEs. They would be outside the coverage of filing the reconciliation statement and the GST audit. So I'm just giving an overview that council keeps on increasing or decreasing the limits, extending the due dates, etc. So it is important that we keep ourselves updated, because there will be a lot of what I say, lot of updates, etc., happening. So yesterday also there were a lot of notifications issued yesterday night, extending the due dates for the return filing, etc. So GST is an evolving law, and therefore the amendments keep on coming. There are a lot of developments happening, etc., and therefore it is essential that we keep ourselves updated. And only thing I wanted to highlight here is that whatever was existing as on the today, I have tried to cover in this presentation. If any amendments, updates are happening, so it is better that we every one of you take cognizance as and when the amendments come. So whatever was the law existing as on date, I have tried to cover that. During this session, the broad structure of the presentation would be, I'll be first discussing the legal provisions which are governing the topic for discussion, and then the connected issues. So I have to cover two topics. These are very wide topics: annual return as well as GST audit. So these are very wide topics, and minimum to discuss both these topics effectively, it takes around 3 hours minimum, because I have been delivering these sessions all over from the last 2 years, and minimum it takes 3 hours to discuss these topics. But since what I say, since it is we have a limited time of 1.5 hours to deal with it, I'll try to cover as much as possible, and try to keep it very easy to understand and crisp, so that we cover the topic as well as all the provisions are covered for the understanding of the participants. Then I'll take you to the clause by clause analysis of the form 9 and 9C, because it is essential that you know what is these forms, because all of you are new. I understand they are you are you will be doing this for the first time, and therefore it is important that we understand what is a form, what has to be filled in the form, and what are the different columns, etc. has to be filled. So that is there. And then I'll also discuss that what should be an approach when you go for an audit, GST audit. Then what all things you should keep in mind. What should be an approach? What should be the areas which you should verify? That I will discuss, and also some of the on how you will file this on the portal, the filing mechanism on the portal, and certain technical glitches which come during the filing procedure, as well as what precautions you should take during the filing of the annual return and the GST audit reports. And at the end, we'll take questions. So whoever has any questions, then they can post the questions in the chat box. At the end of the session, I'll try to take some of the questions uh, based on the whatever time is available. So that is the broad structure of this webinar. So everyone is aware that on 1st of July 2017, GST was implemented, and when GST was implemented, no one was sure that it will be implemented. So 1st of July was a surprise to all, except the people sitting in the finance ministry and the PMO, because they wanted this to be implemented, and therefore it was implemented. And once it was implemented, the basic agenda of everyone was that, especially the business, especially the companies, that whether my systems, accounting systems and IT systems are ready, that I can generate an invoice, etc. And then subsequently, whether my supplier has properly given me the invoice. All these things were the initial discussion points, the initial 1.5 years. And then the issue was about the returns, that I am able to properly file the returns or not. So the GST law, there was a contemplated flow of returns, which the government has decided that they will implement the GST and the return filing system in such a manner that there will be first and one of the sessions, I think there was one topic on the return filing mechanism. So I'm not going to discuss this in more detail, but just to give a glimpse that I was supposed to file a GSTR1 first, and based on that GSTR1 is my output sales, so the sales data, outward supply data. Based on that GSTR1, the GSTR2A, the supplier will file the GSTR1, and the recipients at the recipient's end, this form 2A was there that will get auto populated. Then the recipient had to add you can have a provision to add the invoice, or modify the invoice, or they can reject the invoice, or it can accept accept, reject, add and modify. So if the supplier has missed out anything, then he can add. The supplier has properly given, then he can accept. If the supplier has, that invoice is not received by you, but someone has wrongly mentioned this invoice against your GST number, then you can reject it. Or if there are certain errors in the invoice, like invoice number is wrong, date is wrong, or HSN code is wrong, something, so that modification or amount is wrong, then that modifications can be done by you. Based on that, your GSTR2, that is your details of inward supply, is auto populated. So whatever whatever is the accepted data gets auto populated, which is by you, and then the 1A, whatever amendments you do, rejections or modifications or additions, that goes in the 1A of the supplier, and that supplier has to accept or reject that invoices. So that process has to be done from his end. But whatever additions you have done in the invoices, that credit you can take on the provisional basis in the GSTR2. Then once he accepts or rejects, his GSTR1 get auto amended, and then he has to file a GSTR3, which is a monthly return. What is his output and input, and based on that, a monthly returns has to be filed. So this was a contemplated flow of returns, like the Sensex goes up down. GST data was also was supposed to go up and then get uploaded, then downloaded, etc. But like since the Sensex has been falling so going up down, the GST filing mechanism also was in such situation at that initial stages, and therefore this return filing mechanism of uploading, downloading, etc. did not work. Then what the government did, that since it is not working, they came out with something called as a summary return, that is a GSTR3B, wherein I have to give my output data and input data, and that was to be given. So it is a one-pager return wherein a summary data has to be given, output and input, whatever is my total outward, whatever is the tax computed on that, what is my input, and then whatever is tax payable and how much I am paying in cash or credit. So that was the 3B, that is a consolidated. I think this was being discussed in the earlier session. And then GSTR1 was also there, that is the outward sales data. So after some time they started that you will file GSTR1 also, and GSTR1 based on that outward sales data, invoice wise, whatever different levels, invoice level data is required in some scenarios, consolidated data is required, interstate, intrastate. So that has been discussed in GSTR1 in earlier sessions. I'm not going into that now. GSTR 2 and 3 were kept in abeyance. So they are still in abeyance. They are not required to be filed as of now. However, based on the GSTR 1 of the supplier, the recipients could see the invoices which they have been uploaded in the GSTR 2A. So 2A, the initial what the law contemplates is 2A. You can accept, reject, add, modify, etc. But that is not the existing 2A. 2A existing as on date is only a viewing facility. I can just go and view the 2A, whatever data my supplier has uploaded. I can go and see that on the GST portal. I cannot take any action on that as contemplated by the law. Currently, the 2A is a viewing facility. I can just go there and see whether my supplier has uploaded. And offline basis, I can tell my supplier that you have not uploaded the invoice, or you have wrongly uploaded the invoice, or you are wrongly mentioned that amount. So that amendment facility is to be done through an online or an offline mechanism, and not an online mechanism which the law contemplated. So currently, this is the present scenario. Now we move on to the topic for discussion. Now the GST law contemplates that you have to file monthly returns or quarterly returns for based on the turnover of the SSC. If turnover is below 1.5 crore, then you have to file the GSTR1 on a quarterly basis. If it is above 1.5 CR, then on a monthly basis, etc. So that is there. So what is this annual return? Annual return is nothing but a consolidation of all your monthly returns, all your quarterly returns which you are filing, and your 3B, that is a summary return you are filing on a monthly basis. So it is nothing but a consolidation of all these returns, and therefore what I say the 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 basic agenda of filing the annual return is that all the data has to be consolidated on the basis of the returns you have filed. Now, this is something people may argue that what is the need for filing the annual return? All the data which is I am filing on a monthly basis, that is available with the government. So the government just has to do that. Government will implement some system in that place, and they can do the total and see this is the annual return. So why are they asking the assessees to file the annual return? What is the need for this? And to some extent, the people are correct that annual return is not required, only because annual return is all the data is available in the government, and therefore there is no requirement to file an annual return. But the answer to it is that there are certain modifications during the financial year which impact has been not given in the monthly returns, because if you know the returns, in the returns there is no provision to revise the returns. I cannot revise the returns. I can do amendments to the returns whatever have been filed in the subsequent month. So there will be lot of amendments which I have done in the monthly returns or the GSTR1, and that amendments have to be given into effect, or something I have missed which in the books I have recorded but I have not given effect to it in the returns. So that effect can be given to annual returns, or some mistakes which I have done, I can correct it to the extent possible. So that some provisions we'll see during the annual return. So annual return is nothing but consolidation of return, and there are some provision where I can make corrections in the whatever the annual in the monthly returns I have done, or the quarterly returns I have filed, and the 3B that is a GSTR 3B which I have filed. So that is the purpose of the annual return. And audit is basically audit has to be done to basically reconcile the data which is provided in the books and which is provided in the returns. So the audit in the current GST audit in the current stage is only confined majorly to the reconciliation of the data as per the books and data as per the returns. If there is anything unreconciled, then what is the impact of that? That has to be given in the GST audit report. That is what the primary agenda is. And audit under the GST law, the auditor has to see whether the books of accounts or the document which the GST law prescribes, whether the auditee has properly maintained all those books of accounts, records, documents, etc., or there are some apparent mistakes which he has done or apparent non-compliances which the auditee has done, that auditor has to comment upon or certify. So that is something the scope of the GST audit. So before I go on to the clause by clause analysis, it is important that we refer to the relevant sections first. So there is a section 35(5) of the CGST Act which says that the registered person will be required to get his books of accounts audited by a chartered accountant or the cross accountant if the turnover during the particular financial year exceeds the prescribed limit. If the turnover exceeds the prescribed limit, then he is required to get the books of audited. So not every person who is registered under the GST law is required to get the books of account audited. There are certain threshold limits which are prescribed under the GST law. If your turnover exceeds, aggregate turnover exceeds that threshold limit, then only you are required to get the books of accounts audited. Then secondly, there is a section 44 subsection 2 that which says that a reconciliation to be statement to be furnished along with an annual return for the registered person required to get his books of account audited. So if a registered person is required to get his book of account audited, then he has to furnish a reconciliation statement as well as an annual return. So that both has to be done. Then there is a section 44(1) which says a registered person is required to furnish an annual return. So section 44(1) says every registered person is required to get furnish an annual return. So once you are registered under GST, the section 44(1) says you are required to furnish an annual report. 44(2) says if you are required to get your books of accounts audited, then you have to furnish reconciliation statement also along with the annual return. So 44(1) says every registered person is required to file an annual return. 44(2) says if you are required to get your books of accounts audited, then you have to furnish a reconciliation statement along with the annual return. And 35(5) says who are required to file who are required to get the books of accounts audited. So these are the three sections which we should keep in mind. And all these compliances has to be done within a timeline. So that timeline is the due date. So for every financial year, the law provides a due date for filing the annual return and audit is December of the subsequent financial year. So for financial year 18-19, the original due date was 31st of December 2020. But up to 31st of December 2019, sorry, not 2019, but up to 31st December 2019, the financial year 18-19 audit reports only were not furnished. So therefore, that due date was extended till 31st of March, first 3 months. Because of this, because the system was not working, and again because of this coronavirus outbreak, COVID-19 outbreak, the due date has been extended. And I feel still it will be extended because in June there will be a lot of other things which needs to be done, like TDS filing, income tax return filing, assessment, etc. And the chartered accountant office will be busy. I don't know how people will handle all this, especially the small and medium practitioners, because a lot of things will be done in June, and this social distancing and etc. How we'll be able to manage all this is something a concern for everyone. And I request everyone of you to be take necessary precautions and be safe at home. But coming back to the topic, that the annual return for the financial year 18-19, the current due date is 30th of June 2020. So that is what the current due date is, and we have to try to meet this due date. And the GST portal is working properly as of now, what I understand, but there are some issues still there. But currently the due date is 30th of June. Now, what are the forms we'll be discussing is the GSTR 9, 9A and 9B. 9 is for the normal taxpayers, 9A is for the composition taxpayers, 9B is for the e-commerce operators required to collect tax at source under section 54. So there are three forms. Everyone has to, depends on the category, which category you are following. You have to furnish this 9, 9A and 9B. 9C, that is the audit report, what we call, is divided into two parts. One is a reconciliation statement and one is a certification. So reconciliation statement is basically the reconciliation of the data as per the books and as per the annual returns furnished. So first annual return has to be furnished, and then based on the annual return, a reconciliation statement will be drawn, which will compare the data as per the books and as per the GST returns. There might be various reconciliation items because of the as per GST is governed by the time of supply provisions. You have to pay tax as per the time of supply provisions, but accounting is done as per accounting standards, etc. So there will be timing differences, there will be reconciliation items and that reasons have to be given. What is the reason for the differences, etc. That is the reconciliation statement. And B is a certification part. Certification part basically deals with the maintenance of books of account, whatever accounting books of accounts as prescribed by the law, whether they have been properly maintained or not, that has to be given in certification. That is part B. Now, before I go to the annual return, there are certain aspects which we should know. So this is the broad structure of the annual return. There are total 6 parts to the annual return. Part 1 talks about the basic information. Part 2 talks about the liability. So whatever output related details that has to be compiled, that is given in part number 2. Someone has raised the hand, I think. Can you check? I think.
We can take it up later, Raj.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh, if he's facing some issue, just please check. Okay. So this is a broad structure. Part 1 is the basic information. Part 2 is the liability. So liability may you have to give details of the outward supply. So under outward supply, there will be taxable supply, exempt supply, non-taxable supply. So that is the liability details. And inward supply. So inward supply is on which reverse charge is applicable. So there are certain transactions which are prescribed under GST law, under which the receiver is required to pay directly to the government. So levy is on the receiver, and therefore the receiver has to pay the tax directly to the government. GST is an indirect tax. So normally supplier collects on the receiver and he pays to the government. But there are certain scenarios under which the government says the liability is on the receiver to directly deposit. Example, the lawyer service, GTA service, etc. So these are the services will be covered under the liability section. Then there is a part 3 which is on the input tax credit. So in this, I have to give details of whatever input tax credit I have availed during the financial year 18-19, whatever input tax rate I am required to reverse, and there is something called as a reconciliation of your input tax credit with your GSTR 2A. So whatever ITC I have claimed in the GST returns, that is the GSTR 3B, I have to reconcile it with the ITC which is appearing, or the whatever my suppliers have furnished in the GSTR 2A. So that reconciliation has to be given in part number 3. Part number 4 talks about the tax paid details, whatever taxes I have paid in the annual, the monthly returns. That details has to be given in the tax paid details. Part 5 talks about the amendments. So under GST, as I said, there is no provision to file the revised returns. So whatever the revisions have to be done, that has to be done through an amendment table which is there in the GSTR 1. So that amendments which have been done in the GST returns of the previous financial year from April to September. So there is a deadline to do the amendment also. You can do the amendments only from April to September. So that whatever amendments you have done from April to September, that amendments which are related to the financial year 18-19, that has to be reported in part number 5. And part number 6 is about the other information like refunds, etc., refunds, demands, HSN summary, etc. Now, most of the tables under the annual return, earlier when 17-18 was being implemented, there all the tables were compulsory. You had to give information in all the tables. Thereafter, certain relaxations were given, and now there are many tables which are optional. So most of the details which were creating a kind of difficulty for the taxpayers to comply, they have relaxed that, and therefore a lot of fields have been made optional. Initially, when I discussed, I have only provided the form. I am discussing the form, and during the course of this discussion, I will tell this field is optional, etc. But the slides of which fields are optional, I have mentioned at the end. A table has been provided that this table is optional, etc. I have not directly provided this is optional at that time, because optional means if I want to furnish the data, I can furnish. If I don't want to furnish, that government has given, you need not furnish here. That option is given. So therefore, when I'm discussing the form, so that there is a continuity in discussion, I will be just mentioning that this is optional, but I'll be discussing as if everything is compulsory. At the end, you can see this is optional, and if you want to furnish the data, then you furnish, otherwise not required. So that is how I'll take the session. So there are total 19 reporting, there is 19 tables under the form. So under these, I have to furnish all the data. Outward supply details is in table 4, 5, 10 and 11. Inward supply data is in table 6, 7, 8, 12 and 13. So this is a breakup of the 19 heads, and others is 15, 16, 17, and 18. So this is how the entire structure of outward, inward, and others has been broken up in the GSTR 9. Now, when I discussed section 44.1, I said that every registered person is required to file the annual return. So once I am taken registration under the annual return, under GST, I am required to file an annual return. But there is a notification 47 of 2019 central tax dated 9th of October 2019, which says that if the person whose turnover, aggregate turnover in the financial year is less than 2 crores, does not exceed 2 crores, those person they have an option not to furnish. Means if my turnover in financial year, this was for 2 financial years only, 17-18 and 18-19. So for financial 18-19, my turnover, annual aggregate turnover is less than 2 crores, then in that case, I have an option to furnish or not to furnish. Means if I want, I will furnish. If there is an option, I don't want to furnish, then it is fine. I need not furnish the annual return. So up to 2 crores, it is not mandatory. If it exceeds 2 crores, then it is mandatory. So that is what they are saying in this notification. And there is one more proviso which says that provided the said return shall be deemed to be furnished on the due date if it is not been furnished. So if you are not furnishing the return on the 30th of June, and your turnover is less than 2 crores, then it is said that it will be deemed that you have furnished the annual return. So therefore it is mandatory to file the annual return if you want to file. Means if you want to file, not like mandatory as in you have to file, but if you want to file the annual return, then in that case you have to furnish it before within the due date which is prescribed. After that, they have said that GST will block the filing of the return by such taxpayer. So that thing will be blocked. You cannot file the return. So that is the circular which says. But the logic for this is deemed to have been furnished is that there are certain things which is done by the department post the GST audit, like the assessment, scrutiny, etc. And therefore they have certain timelines for to do these processes, or you have to maintain the books of accounts from the date of furnishing of the annual return for a certain period of time. So if they make this optional for the taxpayers below 2 crores, turnover limit of 2 crores, then this threshold limits how they will compute these timelines of 5 years, 6 years. You have to maintain the records from up to 72 months from the date of filing the annual return. So now if you are not furnished the annual return, then how that timeline of 72 months will be computed? Or department has to do the assessment within 5 years from the end of the from the date of furnishing of the annual return. If you are not furnished the annual return, then how you will compute this timeline? So therefore, they have said if the taxpayers whose aggregate turnover is below 2 crores and they have not furnished the annual return by the due date, then it will be deemed that they have furnished, and therefore from the due date of the filing that will be computed. So that is the intention of this proviso. But they have read in such a way that post the due date you will not be required to file. But that is just to say that people should file that in time. Therefore, they have given this circular. Yes. Next, there are certain doubts with regard to the annual return, which I would like to clear out. And therefore, first question is whether annual return is required to be compulsory furnished. Answer is yes. It is required to be compulsory furnished. Exceptions are given. One is the input service distributors. They are not required. Casual taxable persons, non-resident taxable persons, they are not required to furnish the annual return. And as per the notification we referred in the previous slide, taxpayers whose turnover is below 2 crores, aggregate turnover is below 2 crores, they are not required to furnish the annual return. So that is the exceptions given. Whether annual return has to be furnished, filed separately for each registration, answer is yes. Annual return has to be filed separately for each registration. So under GST, you are aware that if I am having offices in multiple states, I have to take registration state-wise. So if a multi-unit, multi-locational entity is there, suppose Hindustan Unilever will have registration in all the states. So Hindustan Unilever will have to furnish an annual return for each state. So if 31 states they have registration, then for 31 states they have to file annual return. So 31 GSTR 9 they have to furnish. So that is, it has to be furnished qua a GST registration and not at a company level. And the time limit is 30th of June for financial year 18-19. Now, whether any person who has switched over from the composition scheme to normal scheme during the financial year is required to file GSTR 9 and 9C. Answer is yes. So you have to furnish both. That is, for the period under which you are under composition scheme, you have to file 9A, and for the period you are under the normal scheme, you have to file 9. So you have to file both the annual returns if you are switching over from composition scheme during the financial to the normal scheme. Can annual return be amended? Answer is no. There is no provision to amend the annual return. So whatever once you have done, it is freezed. Whatever data you have given in the annual return, that is final, and therefore there is no provision to amend the annual return. And therefore we have to be very careful when you are furnishing the annual return. There is no provision to amend it, or you can whether you can file a revised return. That is, there is no provision to file a revised annual return also. So revision of the annual return is not possible. Amendment also is not possible. This is needs to be taken into consideration. Whether a registered person with no transactions is required to file annual return, answer is no. If there are no transactions, then it is optional. A nil return can be filed. However, you have to look at the aggregate turnover. Suppose in one registration it is zero, but in other registration it is what I say, it is there is some transaction. Then in that case, aggregate turnover has to be computed. And aggregate turnover is at PAN level, and therefore you are required to furnish. So you see the aggregate turnover. It is not that I have to see the turnover at a GSTN level. I have to see the turnover at a PAN level, and therefore at a PAN level, if there is some transaction, then each registration has to file the annual return that is there, unless it is the aggregate turnover is less than 2 crores. So that needs to be done, checked. Whether the person whose registration is cancelled is required to file the annual return, answer is yes. If during the financial year 18-19 there was some period for which you were registered and thereafter it was cancelled, then for that limited period you have to file the annual return, but you have to see the turnover. If it is below 2 crores, then it is optional. Any consequences of filing the annual return? This question should be the first question, because normally क्या होता है कि हम लोग सोचते हैं कि what we think is ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा क्या होगा अगर फाइल नहीं किया ड्यू डेट के टाइम पे. This should be have been the first question, but I have kept it last because we should always try to be compliant and file all the returns in time. But what is the consequence of non-filing of the annual return? You have to pay late fee. The late fee is 200 rupees per day, 100 rupees in CGST and 100 rupees in SGST per day of the delay, and the maximum that the late fee can be is a 0.25% of the state turnover. So that GST level, whatever it is the turnover, maximum penalty will be 0.25% of that turnover in that state, or 200 rupees per day. So that whichever is lower will be the penal consequence. That is a late fee, and there is a general penalty also of 25,000 per act, which for non-compliance under GST, and therefore. What I say is that in addition to the late fee, a general penalty also can be levied of 50,000. Now I move on to the clause by clause analysis of GSTR 9. So GSTR 9, as I said, is divided into 6 parts and 19 tables. So the first part is the basic details. Basic details में क्या आएगा? Financial year, GST number, legal name, trade name. This is all mostly auto-populated, and you can already available the GST on the portal. So this has to be basic details in this. So I'm not. Then the part 2, which is important, it is regards the outward supplies and inward supplies made during the financial year. So whatever the outward supply details are there, the inward supply details on which the liability to pay the tax is there, that has to be provided in this part 2. So in the annual return, there is a facility that all the details get auto-populated based on whatever the monthly and the monthly returns you have filed. Certain fields are in certain fields the data has to be taken from GSTR1. So that is provided in the instructions to this form. There is a detailed instruction for each table in this form. You have to refer those instructions while you are filling this form. So those instructions have to be referred to. So whatever is basically related to the outward supply details, that has to be taken from GSTR1, that the form says. And whatever details are related to ITC, that has to be taken from the 3B, the return you have filed. And the tax paid details have to be taken from the 3B, and payable details are taken from the GSTR1. So that kind of distinction is there. So whenever I discuss any particular table, I'll refer that this data has to be taken from the GSTR1. So consolidation of GSTR1 has to be made initially for every month and 3B also has to be made. So that consolidation has to be done the first exercise whenever you are starting this annual filing exercise. So table 4 is talks about the details of advances, inward supplies, outward supplies made during the financial year on which tax is payable during the financial year. So 4A talks about supplies made to unregistered person. So here in the GST returns, you say there is a separate column for reporting B2C transactions, and that will be taken from the GSTR1, table number 5, table number 7, and if there is any amendments also, and table number 10 of the GSTR1. Now here, this table has to be reported net of amendments and net of debit notes and credit notes, if any. So 4A, when you are reporting the B2C transactions, that has to be reported net of debit notes and credit notes and amendments, if any. So that provision is given in the 4A. So that is now when we discuss the others, there is separate column for mentioning the details of debit notes and credit notes. 4B talks about supplies made to registered person, B2B supplies, reported from table number 4A B2B and table number 4C of GSTR1. So this will be reported from these tables of the GSTR1. And here the debit notes and credit notes have to be separately given effective. So here it will be a gross figure. If any amendments are done, then that has to be reported separately. So what I mean to say is that whatever data you have given in the GSTR 1 table 4A and table 4C, that has to be reported here. If you have made any amendment to that data by way of the amendment table, then that has to be reported separately. Or if you have done any debit notes and credit notes effect, that has to be reported separately. That is what the form says. Now, as I said, there are certain relaxations given. So in the relaxed provisions, they have said that you can give a net figure here also. So now there is a provision wherein you can provide a net figure only in the table. So that net figure only you can give net of debit notes, credit notes, etc. And amendments. So that provision is given. There is no requirement to separately provide this in the law, but both options are available. So you want to make it very clear that here I will provide the gross figure, then whatever amendments are there separately in the amendment table, and then whatever debit notes and credit notes are separately. So that provision is also there. Now, here it should be noted that whatever amendments are done during the financial year, so whatever amendments are done during the financial year only has to be reported, or whatever debit notes and credit notes, or whatever outward supplies have been effected during the financial year, or whatever been reported during the financial year, that only has to be reported in table number 4. Table number 4, whatever is reported during the financial year only will be provided here. Whatever amendments are done or debit notes, credit notes are reported in the subsequent, that is April to September, then that has to be separately reported in table number 10 and 11, that is separately provided. So here only the during the financial year whatever I have done have to be reported here. Then zero rated supplies, exports on payment of tax. So here, in this you have to report the exports on payment of tax. So under exports there are two options. Exports, that is you can make the exports on payment of tax or without payment of tax. So here I have to report the exports which are made on payment of tax. Exports under LUT will not be reported. There is a separate column for that. And debit notes can be separately provided, or there is option to provide net of debit notes. Supplied to SEZ on payment of tax. So this will be supplies made to SEZ. Again, SEZs are also supplies to SEZ is also considered as zero rated supply. And there are two options. I can supply to an SEZ on payment of tax or without payment of tax. So here supplies to SEZ on payment of tax has to be reported. Then there is something called as a deemed export. These are not physical exports. These are deemed to be an export. So you are not actually exporting the goods outside India, but the government by notification has specified particular transactions, that if the transactions are falling under this category which is notified by in the notification of the government, then it will be considered to be deemed export. So the deemed export transactions are not physical export. They are not actually the export transaction, but the government by of a notification that said that this is a deemed export. So in this, there are certain advantages, like there are refund mechanisms provided and for them. So this is in the notification number 48 of 2017, especially supplies made against advance authorization or an EPCG license. They are all prescribed under this notification. I'm not discussing the concept of deemed export in detail due to lack of time, but you can refer this notification if you want to greater clarity on that. And again, debit notes and credit notes of this have to be separately reported. But again, the relaxation which have been given, they say that can be reported net of debit notes and credit notes. Then 4F talks about advances on which tax has been paid but invoice had not been issued. So now in this, what under GST law, there is a time of supply provision which says that if I am what I say, if I'm required to pay GST on receipt of advance or issuance of invoice, whichever is earlier. So if I'm receiving advance in earlier, then I am required to pay GST on that. So, but this column says, as I said, you have to prepare a consolidation of the monthly returns. Now, what people will do here is they will prepare the consolidation and do a total. Here, that has not, that practice should not be done. Here, what has to be reported is that advances on which tax has been paid, but invoice has not been issued. So I have received an advance in the month of April, and I've issued an invoice in the month of June. Then that advance gets set off against the invoice. I will pay GST, and when I raise the invoice, I'll set it off against the return. That provision you have discussed in the GST returns. Here, only those advances against which the invoice has been not issued till March 19. That only advances have to be reported. So whatever the unadjusted advances are there at the end of the financial year, that only has to be reported. And this is only for services. Only for services, this concept of advance on a payment of tax on the receipt of advance is there. For goods, initially it was there, but then they relaxed it, and there is a notification number the 66 of 2017, which says after up to 15th of November 2017, up to that only. So in the previous financial year, there was a provision that on goods also advance was applicable for certain period of time, but for financial year 18-19 only on services this advance concept is applicable. Again, net effect to be reported here, whatever the net refund of advances not to be reported here. So that is what. So advances on which tax has been paid but invoice is not issued, that only is to be reported here. Inward supplies on which tax is to be paid on reverse charge basis. Now this is not your outward supply, these are inward supplies. There are certain supplies which are prescribed under the GST law on which you have to pay tax under reverse charge basis as a recipient. So if you are availing services of a lawyer, then you are required to pay tax under reverse charge. If you are importing services from outside India and the service falls under definition of import of service, then you are required to pay tax on reverse charge basis. Or if you are availing services of a goods transport agent, then in that case, tax has to be paid under reverse charge basis. So there are particular transactions which are specified under the GST law that you are required to pay tax on reverse charge basis. So in this case, what I say, these transactions will be reported in this column. Inward supplies to be on which tax is to be put on reverse charge basis. Then credit notes and debit notes in respect of B2E above. So as I said, there is a specific column for reporting the debit notes and credit notes. So these are the columns under which I have to report the debit notes and credit notes. But now since the relaxation is given, I can report the transaction net of debit notes and credit notes also. But if you want to separately report it, then 4I and 4J tables have to be used. Amendments or tax declared through amendments, supplies or tax declared through amendments. So in this, as I said, under the GST law, there is a table 9 and 10, which under which you have to report the amendments. There is no provision to revise the returns. So whatever amendments you have done in the return for during the financial year 17-18, that is from April 19 to March, April 18 to March 19, those returns, in those returns only I'm saying, again I'm stressing on those returns only, those details of amendments have to be reported here in 4K. Now here, only the value related amendments have to be reported. If there is any amendment in the invoice number you are doing, or amendment in the invoice date or the HSN code, etc., those amendments are shipping bill numbers. So those amendments will not be reported because these are non-value amendments. Only the value related amendments will be reported in table 4K. Supplies or tax reduced to amendments with the reduction in the amount or the tax liability, that amendment you have done, then that will be reported here. That will be taken total, and supplies or advances on which tax has to be paid. So that will be transferred to your GSTR 9C. That is a reconciliation statement. Just this I'm just mentioned a cross check. This data will be reconciled with your outward supply data as per the books, whatever you provide. Then details of outward supplies on which tax is not payable, that has to be reported here. So there are certain transactions on which tax is not payable, like a zero rated supply, export without payment of tax. Therefore, as I said, the export, there are two options: on payment of tax and without payment of tax. So exports without payment of tax will be reported in this table. Then supplies to SEZ without payment of tax. So that will be reported here. Now, 5C is something interesting. Supplies on which taxes will be paid by the recipient on reverse charge basis. Now, when I discussed 4G, that was inward supplies on which tax has to be paid on reverse charge basis. 5C is a different criteria. This is for the suppliers on whose supplies the recipients are liable to pay tax. For example, I take an example of a GTA, a goods transport agent. As I said, if you are receiving services from the GTA, you as a recipient are required to pay the tax. But this is a case where a GTA is filing the GST return or the annual return. Suppose a GTA has two businesses. One is a transportation business and one is a warehousing business. On the transportation business, the freight income, whatever he earns, on that, the recipient is required to pay GST under reverse charge basis. But he also has a warehousing business under the same GST number. And on warehousing business, there is no reverse charge. On that, he as a supplier will collect tax from the recipient and pay to the government. So he is registered under GST. Once he is registered under GST, then he is required to issue invoice for all the taxable supplies. In that invoice, there is a column that whether tax is payable under reverse charge or not. So whenever he issues an invoice for the freight income, he will have to issue a tax invoice, and in that tax invoice, he will have to mention that these supplies tax is payable under reverse charge. So that supplies on which in the invoice he has mentioned that tax is payable on the reverse charge by the recipient, those invoices will be reported here. So those invoices are reported in table 4B of the GSTR1. So from there, the data will be taken. Okay, and then again, debit notes and credit notes separately have to be mentioned, or relaxation for 1819, you can provide net of debit notes and credit notes also. That relaxation is given. Now there are three more transactions: exempted, nil rated, and non-GST supply. What is exempted, what is nil rated, and what is non-GST is a matter of always a dispute. People are very confused on what is exempted, nil rated, and non-GST. So under GST, there is a levy section which says GST is levied on certain transactions. Then there is an exemption section that government by way of a notification can say these services are exempt from GST. And there is a section which says that these services are neither goods nor services, or they are outside the purview of GST. What is outside the purview of GST? There are certain products, 5 petroleum products and alcoholic consumption for alcoholic liquor for human consumption. Now that is outside the scope of GST, and therefore it is a non-GST supply. There are certain transactions under Schedule 2, Schedule 3, which are neither supply of goods nor supply of service. Now this is like sale of land, then high sea sales, international merchant trading, that third party exports, supply of goods in custom bonded warehouse. So all these are transactions which are specified in Schedule 3 of the CGST Act. That will be non-GST supply. So that has to be reported in table number 5F. What is exempted and what is nil rated? Now, as I said, levy section says GST will be levied at the such rate as may be prescribed under the notification of the government. So there is a rate schedule which the government prescribes, wherein there are different schedules: Schedule A, Schedule B, Schedule C, Schedule D. Under Schedule A, there are 0% rate. So if your product is falling under 0% rate, basically the agriculture products, that will be falling under the 0% rate. So if your products or services are falling in Schedule number A of the rate tariff, then it will be nil rated. What is exempted? Exempted is something which is prescribed under the rate schedule, but there is a specific exemption notification by which is an exempted from GST. So it will be under the rate schedule also, but there is a specific exemption notification because of which no GST is payable on that service. So for example, I take a renting of accommodation where the declared tariff or the tariff value is less than 1,000 rupees. So that is an exempted service. Or I am providing certain services for renting of religious premises. So that is an exempt service. So these are services which is exempted from the purpose of GST, or services provided by healthcare professionals like doctors, etc. So this is an exempted service. So that will be under the exempted criteria. Or there are certain goods which are exempted from the purview of GST. So that will be under the exempted category. Nil rated and exempted is, nil rated is a broader term. It will include whatever items are provided in Schedule A, that is 0 rated. Exempted, there is a specific exemption notification, and then I have to report into the exempted category. So that is a distinction between exempted, nil rated, and non-GST. Now, since there was a confusion and people are not able to understand it properly, what the government has said that whatever be the case, you can put the total figure of on the all the taxes like exempted, nil rated, and non GST under one column of exempted only. If you're not able to bifurcate this, so you can put everything in the exempted column, and therefore you can comply with this. So that relaxation is given. Then debit notes and credit notes in respect of these transactions that can be separately reported, and amendments also can be separately reported. Or there is a relaxation where you can report all the in the respective heads net of amendments and debit notes and credit notes. So that provision is given for financial year 17, 18, 19, 19. 1920 there will be separate form. What I feel that there will be separate annual returns forms, etc. So these forms are only for basically 17, 18, 18, 19. 1920 they are contemplating to have separate forms. I don't know how whether they will make it applicable because of this coronavirus outbreak, but it is possible that they might continue with it or they might come out with the new forms. But till this March, before this COVID-19 outbreak was there, I was being told that they are contemplating to have separate forms for the next financial year. But let's see what happens. So this is about the output details. Then there is a table number 10 and 11. Now here I have to report the transactions for which the amendments are made or debit notes or credit notes are issued after the financial year, but it is related to financial years 18-19. So reported in the GST returns from April 19 to September 19, but these transactions are related to the financial year 18-19. So those transactions have to be reported in table number 10 and 11. So that is about the outward supply details. Now I am moving on to the inward supply details. Now inward supply details, basically it will be from your GSTR 3B. So all the data has to be taken from your GSTR 3B. Initially when this form was there was a columns that you have to bifurcate your ITC into input services and capital goods. So that bifurcation was required to be made whenever you are providing details of your inputs ITC. But when you had filed the GSTR 3B, there was no such requirement to bifurcate your ITC into inputs, input services, and capital goods. So the GSTR 9 contemplates that you have to bifurcate everything into inputs, input services, and capital goods. But thereafter, they have relaxed this condition, and after that, inputs, input services, and capital goods, everything can be put under inputs category once. So then that relaxation has been provided, and everything you can put under the inputs category only, and the bifurcation is not required. So if you have done the bifurcation of inputs, input service, and capital goods, you can provide it. Otherwise, you can put all the ITC in the inputs category only. So that relaxation is given for financial year 17, 18, and 18, 19. So now I go on to discuss the ITC. So ITC 6A, this will be the ITC which will be auto-populated from your GSTR 3B only. So that data is auto-populated here. Then 6B is the ITC, inward supplies, other than imports and inward supplies liable to reverse charge, but include services received from the SEZ units. So whatever forward charge related ITC means supplier has charged me the ITC GST and have taken the ITC of that has to be reported here. So all the forward charge related ITC has to be reported in 6B. 6C and 6D are basically the ITC which is on the inward supplies on which you as a recipient have paid the GST and you have taken the credit of that. So that 6C and 6D talks about that you as a recipient have you have received those services, and on that you have paid the GST under reverse charge and taken the ITC. So 6C is received from unregistered person and 6D talks about received from registered person. So that bifurcation has to be done by you, that if you are receiving certain services from unregistered person and you are required to pay GST, then that has to be reported in 6C and 6D. So now 6C unregistered person, there was section 9(4) which blanketly given, which said blanket section which said that if you are if you are a registered person and you're purchasing the goods or services, receiving the services from an unregistered person, then you're required to file under reverse charge. But that was applicable only till 13th of October 2017. So initial stage only. After that, that was relaxed and the exemption was provided. But that is possible that services under 9(3) also, that is the specified services, you are taking it from unregistered person. Now the lawyers. Now lawyers are not registered under GST because all the services are all their output is under the reverse charge category. Therefore, they are not required. There is a specific exemption for those people. They are not required to take registration only. So lawyers may not be registered under GST. So those inward supplies that will be reported under the 6C. Suppose I took an example of the GTA. You as a recipient has availed services from a GTA, but he has issued a tax invoice and he's a registered person. Then in that case, those inward supplies will be reported in 6D on which you have taken ITC. So that bifurcation has to be done. Then 6E talks about the import of goods. Now, import of goods, when you import the goods, you are required to pay basic customs duty as well as the IGST. So that IGST you can take the credit. So IGST credit, whatever is paid on the import of goods has to be reported here. Now, import of goods if includes the supplies from an SEZ. Now, what is the concept of SEZ? If I am a domestic tariff unit, that is, I am not an SEZ. So whatever is not an SEZ is a domestic tariff unit. So if an SEZ is supplying to a domestic tariff unit, then it is considered to be an import under the Customs Act. And the domestic tariff unit has to file a bill of entry and they has to pay the basic customs duty as well as the IGST. So whatever I have doing an import of goods from an SEZ, that is also subject to IGST. I as a recipient is required to pay tax under the as an import. That will be reported here. Then import of services excluding supplies from SEZ, inward supplies. So inward supplies from SEZ are not subject to these import provisions. In that case, SEZ only has to discharge the tax. So that is not here. So that is under forward charge, not under reverse charge. But import of services from outside India. If I am receiving services from outside India, then I have to pay tax under reverse charge. So that if I have taken the ITC on those import of services, then under 6F that has to be reported. Then ITC received from ISD. ISD is a concept wherein there is a head office and head office is receiving some common services like audit services, advertisement services, etc. And head office is there is a head office which is receiving the services, but the services are used by the branch offices also, which are situated all over India in different states. Then in that that ISD will distribute the credit to all the different locations based on a turnover criteria which is prescribed in the GST law section 20 of the CGST Act. So that ITC is distributed by an ISD. So whatever the respective location, whatever ITC is received from the HOISD, that I have to report it here. So what I have received an ITC of related to the audit fees from the ISD registration. So I will report that in this 6G. Amount of ITC reclaimed. So here 6B in this I had specifically mentioned that credit availed but reversed and then reclaimed should not be reported here. So that has to be separately reported. In the initial structure when I discussed, I have to report details of availed, reversed and reconciliation. So whatever credit I have availed, but then I have to reverse due to some of the non-compliance I have done, that I have not there are input tax related conditions that I have to pay the consideration and the tax within 180 days from the date of issuance of invoice. If I am not fulfilling that condition, then I have to reverse the credit. So if I have earlier taken the credit and then I have reversed, then I have to not report it here. Then reversal column is there. But then in the same financial year I have reclaimed the credit. If I make the payment at a later stage, then there is a provision that I can reclaim the credit. But that kind of credits will not be reported here. If they have been availed and reversed, then you can report here. Availed, but what do you say? Availed and reversed and then reclaimed, then not here. So you should not report in 6B. You should report in 6H. So all the three things are there: availed, reversed, and then reclaimed. Then 6H. But that is only during the financial year. During the financial year, only those returns which you have filed during the financial year, in that case only you have to report. Then table number 6K and 6L, this is the Tran 1 credit. Whatever the Tran 1 credit, this is basically the credit of the previous regime, whatever has been carried forward in the GST. So that credit was to be mentioned in here. Now here, if there is some revision being made in the Tran 1, then there is a separate provision that you have reversed the Tran 1 credit. But here, if some credit was pertaining to the financial year 17-18 and you have taken the Tran 1 credit, then you have to report it here. But that is to be in financial year 18-19 only. The time limit of Tran 1 was till December 2017 only, end of the December. But there are certain associates who had filed a writ petition in the High Court, and they had got a relief from the GST, also from the GST Council as well as the portal, that they can file the Tran 1 who has missed out filing the Tran 1. So they had filed the Tran 1 in 18-19 also. So those associates will report the transaction over here. Now this will not be reported in the GSTR returns. They will not be, data will not be available in the GSTR returns. You have to see the electronic credit ledger of the associate from the GSTN portal to see whatever the Tran 1 and Tran 2 related credits were there. Then table number 7 talks about the ITC reversal in the ineligible ITC. So 7A is about the Rule 37. Rule 37 ITC reversal is nothing but if you have not paid the consideration and the tax amount within 180 days, then you have to report the reversal here. So that has to be reported. 39 is about the ISD. Suppose I have received some excess ITC. I was not supposed to receive that ITC. The turnover calculation which I mentioned, that the head office ISD registration will distribute the ITC based on the turnover of all the registration. But subsequently there were certain amendments in the turnover at the end of the financial year, and some excess credit has been taken. Then in that case, this redistribution is done, and I have to reverse the credit. So that credit has to be reported here. Rule 42 and 43 ITC reversal. Now under GST, if I am providing taxable outward, all my outward supply is taxable, all the outward supply I am discharging GST, then full ITC can be taken subject to section 17(5) restrictions, etc. That is negative list, all that. But if I am providing taxable services as well as exempt supplies, some products are taxable, some products are exempt, then in that case, whatever the common services are there, common inputs or common services, like I am a dealer which is providing agriculture products also, and I am only ready-made garments also. So agriculture products are exempt and ready-made garments are taxable. But there are certain services like common. Now audit services is common. Audit will be done at a company level, and therefore the CA will charge GST to the company. And the company, since they are doing taxable as well as exempt activity, then in that case they can take the credit in the proportion only. They cannot take the full input tax credit. So that bifurcation has to be done. So whatever credit is pertaining in the proportion of the turnover has to be reversed. Similarly for capital goods, that has to be done. That is for 43. So that formula is prescribed under the rules. You have to refer the rules whenever doing a reversal. Based on the formula, you have to do the reversal. Then section 17(5) talks about the what I say is about the negative list items. That is a negative list block credits. All your renting a motor vehicle, food credit, etc. All that has to be reported here. Reversal of Tran 1 and Tran 2 credit. So whatever credit you have taken in Tran 1 and Tran 2, but subsequently due to certain amendments, like the Krishi Kalyan says there was a reversal required, or some excess during there was an audit being conducted by the department, and department said that you are required to reverse the Tran 1 credit, which is earlier taken. So that has to be reported in the reversal columns. Then there are other reversals which needs to be done. Suppose you are in the normal scheme and you are shifting to a composition scheme. Then in that case, whatever in composition scheme you are not eligible to take the credit. Then whatever credit is there that has to be reversed. Or you are cancelling the registration, then you are required to reverse the credit. So all these credits which are not specifically mentioned in any of the rules, then that will be under the other reversals that has to be reported. Now I go to the major part, which is the reconciliation as per the GSTR 2A and 3B. So 8A, under 8A, the ITC will get auto-populated from the GSTR 2A. Then that will be compared with the ITC as per the whatever you have taken in your 3B and reported in table B and table 6B and 6H. Now this will be all the ITs on which the supplier has charged me the tax. Reverse charge related ITC will not be reported, will not be compared, because you are only paying the tax and you are only taking the credit. So that will not be compared. Comparison will be whatever the supplier has charged me the GST, that will be compared with what ITC I have taken. So that comparison only will be done. So there will be some ITC which will be appearing in your GSTR2 and some ITC which you have taken. Then during the financial year you have taken, because 6B and 6H talks about during the financial year only. Now there is a section 16(4) which says that if if the invoices are pertaining to a particular financial year, the time limit to take the credit is up to September of the next financial year. So for the financial year 18-19, there will be certain invoices on which you have taken the credits in the returns from April 19 to September 19. So that credit will be reported in 8C. So invoices are pertaining to financial year 17-18. They are dated financial year 18-19, but the credit you have taken in the next financial year, that is in financial year 19-20, then that has to be reported in 8C, because supplier would have in the 2A, the supplier would have reported as a transaction of financial year 18-19. But there are certain problems that you are receiving the invoices late, or your first it goes to the accounts team, then it goes to some other team, then comes to the tax team. So that lag period is always there in taking the credit. So therefore, that credit is taken in the next financial year. So that credits will be reported in 8C, and then comparison will be done based on the 2A. And if there is a difference, then that has to be, then difference becomes payable. But there are issues. If there is a positive difference, then whatever credit is not availed, whatever as per 2A and 3B is there, that will lapse, because the time limit to take the credit has already been elapsed. So in September 2018, you can take the credit of financial year 18-19. So whatever is the difference between the ITC of 2A and 3B, there might be a positive as well as negative difference. Positive difference ITC will lapse. Negative, whatever is the difference, that becomes disputed, means you have to pay that ITC, but that will also depend on various scenarios. So now what are the scenarios wherein this mismatch can happen? That supplier has not filed the GST return and he does not respond. So he has not filed the GST return, therefore it is not appearing in the 2A. He has uploaded the invoice as B2C and instead of being it reported as B2B. So he has not reported against your GST number and is given a consolidated in the B2C column. He has filed the return, but due to some technical problem, invoice is not appearing. He has filed the return, but some value is incorrect. Or he has uploaded the invoice on a different GST number. He has filed the return, but he has reported in a wrong invoice. And the supplier has saved the GSTR1, but is not submitted. That is also possible. So in the different scenarios, that negative difference will be there. So on a fact-to-fact basis, you have to decide whether I have to pay the tax or not pay the tax. The basic principle will be whether the compliance or default is on the part of the supplier or default is part on me, and whether I have taken reasonable steps. So there are various judgments in the earlier regime wherein if the default, both the supplier and receiver have together done some kind of a arrangement wherein some fake input tax rates have been taken, and they have not complied with the law, then they are required to reverse that cases. But there is a genuine recipient, and he has done all the fulfill all the conditions of taking the credit, but the default is on the part of the supplier. Then in that case, first the department should go against the supplier. The department should recover from the supplier, and then that should be the recipient should be approached. So that is what the kind of thing has to be exercised, has to be taken if there is a negative difference. But outrightly, you should not reverse, and you should not make your client pay the tax. The reasons have to be seen. What is the reason for this mismatch? And based on the reason, you should inform your principals, and they should take a decision that whether you need to pay the tax or not pay the tax. Then part 4 is about the tax payable details. So this will be basically auto-populated from 3B. So whatever is payable, this you can edit, paid through cash and paid through ITC. This is basically auto-populated from the 3B. So whatever, if there are certain transactions which are not reported in 3B and GSTR1, then that transactions, whatever have not been reported, but in the books they are appearing and have not discharged the tax on that, then I need to discharge the tax now. And for that, I have to first deposit the tax in the electronic cash ledger and then offset it against the form GSTR from GST DRC03. So that DRC03 has to be filled, and such transaction on which tax was not paid at all and not reported in the returns, but it is appearing in the books, then I have to pay the tax. Such transaction will be reported in table number 4 of part 2, and tax needs to be discharged to DRC03. Now, this is table 12 and 13. This is about the ITC reversal. So now there are certain input tax rate which is I have taken in financial year 17-18. But what I say, I have reversed the what I say. I have reversed the entire thing. I have reversed the credit or some credit in the next financial year. So that credits have to be reported here, or some credit which is related to the previous financial year have taken here. So that ITC needs to be reported here. So in table number 12 and 13. Now the other information, this is the part 6. In this, I have to give the details of the refund claim, refund rejected, refund. So all these refund related information or the demands which are raised. So all this information has to be given, but this is optional. You need not furnish it for the financial year 18-19. Then information related from received from the composition taxpayers, deemed supply under section 143 and goods sent on approval basis. So here you have to report that all those transactions. This is also an optional field. Now, what is a deemed supply under section 143? This is nothing but the related to job work transaction. If you are sending the goods to a job worker, inputs and capital goods, and for the inputs, the condition is that you should receive back the goods within 1 year. Or if you are sending the capital goods to a job worker, then you should receive the goods back within 3 years. If you are not receiving that, it will be deemed that it is a supply to the job worker from the first day on which you had sent to the job worker. So such transactions have to be reported in this column, whatever are the deemed supplies. Or if you are sending the goods on an approval basis or a consignment basis, then you have to receive the goods back within 6 months. If you are not receiving the goods within 6 months, then that goods will be deemed to have been supplied. So that kind of transaction will be reported in this table 16, but this is optional basis now. Table 17-18 is regarding HSN summary of outward supplies and HSN summary of inward supplies. HSN summary of outward supplies is always provided in GSTR1, so that it can be taken from GSTR1. And inward supply data we were not maintaining it, so that had to be computed and compiled. But now both these fields have been made optional. 17-18, table 17-18, you are not required to. It is not mandatory, so it is optional. 19 is about the late fee payable and paid. This is about if you are filing the annual return late, then there is some late fee you have to pay. So that payable and paid column is there here. Then verification column, you have to verify whatever data has been provided is correct and there is no concealment. And if there is any reduction in the output tax liability, that then I have that benefit has been passed on. So this is nothing but the anti-profiteering provisions which needs to be certified here. That verification that I have compared with the anti-profiteering provisions. That if there is a reduction in the rate of tax, then I have not profited from that rate. I have passed on the benefit of that reduction in the rate of tax to the to my customers. That declaration has to be. So in this I have mentioned which all fields tables are optional. So this I have provided at the end of the session. Slides. These are all the optional fields. You can just refer to it. These are all fields optional. Then the filing mechanism on the portal. Online filing is possible. Government has given a system wherein you can download the consolidated GSTR1 and 3B in PDF format, and most of the fields are auto-populated. There are some fields which are not auto-populated. Means the auto-populated fields, if there is mandatory that will be auto-populated, that will be auto-populated. But there are all the fields which are auto-populated and you can edit it. So there are two fields: auto-populated and non-editable, and auto-populated and editable. So whatever data is available with the government, they will auto-populate that fields, and you can edit it also based on the information. That there are a lot of mistakes which happen, so you need to check everything. So that auto-population edited fields, you can edit it. Then there is a single-click nil return. You can file a nil return under a single click. So that facility is available. Offline facility is also available. You can file the annual return offline also. So in that, this slide you can be referred. So offline tool is there where you can file the return. So this I am just going. You can see this later. Now I am coming to the main topic of the GST audit and the reconciliation statement. So GST audit and reconciliation statement, 2-3 things you should know. That as I discussed in the earlier slide, that GST audit has to be done if the turnover limit exceeds a particular threshold limit is prescribed. If it exceeds a particular threshold limit, then only you are required to do the GST audit. So section 35 says turnover in the financial exceeds the prescribed limit. Then that is provided in the rules that if the aggregate turnover, now that earlier turnover was used, now aggregate turnover has been used. So government has clarified that you should see the aggregate turnover. So if aggregate turnover exceeds 2 crores, then you are required to get the GST audit done. But now there is a proviso inserted recently which says that if the aggregate turnover exceeds 5 crores, then only you are required to get the GST audit done. So now there are two threshold limits. Annual return, the threshold limit is 2 crores. But GST audit threshold limit is 5 crores. So it is possible that uh, an entity which has the turnover of 3 crores, they will be required to file the annual return, but they are not required to get the to file the reconciliation statement. If the turnover exceeds 5 crores, then only both are required. Okay. So that needs to be seen. So that proviso is recently inserted of 5 crores. Uh, then you have to see the turnover at aggregate level. That is the PAN level. The turnover has to be seen. The turnover has to be computed at the PAN level and not at the state level. So if at a PAN level the turnover is more than 5 crores, then only GST audit needs to be done. Aggregate turnover has been defined under section 2 subsection 6 of the CGST Act. And aggregate turnover has to be seen and not the turnover, because they have recently issued a clarification. This press release dated 3rd of July 2019, wherein they have said you have to see at the aggregate turnover. So these are some case studies. Taxpayer A having a total turnover of 100 crores is registered in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Turnover in Tamil Nadu is 50 crores and Kerala 50 crores. GST audit, yes, because total aggregate turnover exceeds 5 crores. Taxpayer B having total turnover of 100 crores is registered in Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu 1.5 crore, Kerala 98.5 crores. Now in this case, total turnover exceeds 2 crores, even if in Tamil Nadu 1.5 crores. So in that case also both, since aggregate turnover exceeds 5 crores, both the registration you have to do the GST audit. Then taxpayer C having total turnover of 5.5 crores total, but in Tamil Nadu is 3 crores, Kerala is 2.5 crores. So individual level it is less than 5 crores, but at an aggregate level, since it is more than 5 crores, you have to do the GST audit for both the registrations. Having a total turnover of 100 crores has operations only in Gujarat and making only exempted supplies. Now, if you only exempted supplies, then you are not required to obtain registration. So, if you are obtained registration, then in that case, you are required to get the GST audit. But if you are not taken registration, then you are not required to get the GST audit done. Turnover of 101 crore is registered in Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Maharashtra. In Gujarat, he is selling only exempted products, that is 100 crores. Tamil Nadu, taxable products of 1 crore, and Kerala not selling anything. In Maharashtra, ISD registration is there. So if in now again aggregate turnover level, you have to see aggregate turnover is more than 5 crores, and therefore irrespective of whether it is exempted or nil rated or whatever be the case, non nil or whatever be the case, you have to get the GST audit done because the aggregate turnover exceeds 5 crores. So in states Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala, you are required to do the GST audit. But ISD, there is no concept. ISD is not a register, is not a supplier or a registered person. It is only a office for distributing the credit. So for that ISD, no audit is required to be. Then Mrs. A has a total receipts of 6 crores and registered in Gujarat. Now in that renting of land 1 crore and sale of land 5 crores. Sale of land is exempted under GST and it is specified in the schedule 3. So it is neither supply of goods nor supply of service. So not included in the aggregate turnover. So if it is not included in the aggregate turnover is only 1 crores. So in this case, since it is less than 5 crores, the aggregate turnover, taxable turnover is less than 5 crores, then in that case GST audit is not required to be done. Now this is something very important, that what has to be included in the turnover limit. One is the taxable outward supplies. So normally what happens, people will take it from the P&L account, revenue from operations. No, that has not to be seen. You have to see the whatever is the GST turnover. As per the GST returns or GST law, the aggregate turnover has to be computed. So under GST, there are certain transactions which are supplies, even if they are made without consideration, like your stock transfers, etc. In that case, that is on that GST is applicable. So GST has to be that has to be taken into consideration. Those items need to be computed, taken into consideration while computing the turnover. So all your supplies without consideration, it is branch transfer, cross charging of services, etc., will be included. Exempt supplies again has to be included because aggregate turnover includes exempt supplies. Zero rated supplies, yes, to be included. Advances received from the customer which are unadjusted at the end of the financial year, yes, because as per time of supply, GST is applicable on that. So that has to be included. Movable asset sale, the sale value has to be included, not the profit. Renting of land, yes. Sale of land, no, not to be included. Profit on sale of securities, not to be included. Dividend on shares, not to be included. Inward supplies on which tax is payable under reverse charge, not to be included. Outward supplies on which tax is payable receivable on reverse charge, yes, to be included. Taxes to be excluded. So all this included, excluded has to be seen. Now, what is the scope of GST audit? If you see the definition of the audit under the GST Act, it says everything and anything has to be done under the audit. But for the initial period, they have relaxed that it is only the reconciliation of the data from the books as well as the returns. Only that kind of reconciliation has to be done. So now what auditor has to certify? He has to certify balance sheet, profit and loss account, and income expenditure account, and the cash flow statement. So these three he has to certify, and he has to examine. Sorry, not certify. He has to examine balance sheet, profit and loss account, and cash flow statement. So that has to be examined, and then he has to report that whether the books of accounts, records, documents as required by the GST law are properly maintained or not. So there are certain books of accounts, documents, records which are required to be prepared under the GST law that the auditor has to certify that whether they have properly been maintained or not, and whether the particulars furnished in GST or 9C, that is a reconciliation statement, whether they are true and fair. So that certification has to be given. Earlier it was true and correct. Now it is true and fair. That amendment has been done. Then whether state-wise balance sheet and profit and loss has to be done. As I said, you have to prepare the annual return and audit at a state level. Then data of the books has to be bifurcated at the state level also. So all your outward supply and inward supply ITC related data has to be bifurcated at the state level. So it is essential to prepare the state level P&L account in case of multi-locational entities, and in case of the in case of certain items like advances, etc., that balance sheet items also, some balance sheet items have to be bifurcated at the state level. So a state level balance sheet with the limited items can be done, and P&L can be bifurcated again at the state level. So that requirement before starting an audit, you should tell the clients that you should all give this information earlier only before you start the audit, state level breakup. Now, what are the books of accounts or records to be maintained is given under the section 35. All the production records, ITC, inward, all these records have to be maintained. Then there are certain documents which needs to be maintained, like tax invoice, bill of supply, receipt voucher, refund voucher, revised tax invoice, debit notes, credit notes, e-way bills. E-way bills is very important. Delivery challan. So all this you have to check as an auditor whether the client has properly maintained all these records. Now for self-invoicing, if you are paying tax under reverse charge, then there is a provision that you have to raise a self-invoice. Now most of the clients are not raising the self-invoice. Self-invoice is basically to take the credit of the tax paid under reverse charge. So that if self-invoice is not maintained, then there is an issue that you might not be eligible to take the IT. So you should tell all your clients that you should raise self-invoices for all the reverse charge related payments. So for that, self-invoices has to be checked. So all this you have to check whether client has properly maintained all this proper series number as per the rules. Rule 46 to 55 you have to refer, and as per those rules, those invoices should be compliant. All the details which are prescribed under the rules has to be seen, and whether they are properly maintained, all the columns are proper, place of supply is mentioned, tax computed properly, so that CGST, SGST applied, SGST, IGST applied, so GST number are properly mentioned in the documents. So all that needs to be seen by you as a auditor. Then there are certain additional records which needs to be maintained, like if you're importing the goods, bill of entry, exporting shipping bill, reverse charge related documents, advance related documents, advance received. So all this you can refer after the session. These all records have to be maintained. So this auditor, whatever data has to be maintained. Since there is a lack of time, I'm just skipping certain things, but you can refer. These are self-explanatory, and you can see it at a later stage. Then what is the responsibility of the auditor? In the form only they have mentioned that auditor has to recommend if there is an additional tax needs to be paid, or some due to non-reconciliation of the turnover or the input tax rate. Some additional tax becomes payable because of the reconciliation between the books and the returns. Then that has to be recommended by the auditor. Then auditor shall also recommend if there is any other amount to be paid for the supplies not included in the annual return. So that then auditor also has to check the refunds. So whatever refunds the assessee has taken, if there is any error in the refund working, that also has to be seen by the auditor. And if there is any erroneous refund which has been taken, then that has to also be seen. Any demands which are to be settled by the auditor, that also which needs to be settled, that has to be declared. This is the what I discussed. What is the role of the chartered accountant? That government has in the press release has said that it is only respect to reconciliation, the reconciliation of the values in the annual return with the books. So that is given. But still, as an auditor, CA, I have to fulfill my obligations under the ICI regulations and under the auditing standards. So that needs to be checked. So whatever auditing standards I have to follow as per the ICI regulations, I have to fulfill that. So it is not that I just rely on the press release and not fulfill all these auditing and ICI regulations, but I have to see that also. Yes. Now, what all types of reconciliations I have to do in 9 and 9C? Charmi, how much till what time I can continue?
You can continue, I think, for the next 15-20 minutes.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Thank you. So in 9C, there are two kinds of reconciliations you have to do. One is the reconciliation of your outward supplies, whatever the outward supplies are there, that has to be reconciled. So whatever outward supply as per books and as per returns, that reconciliation is required. And second reconciliation which is required, there is ITC of the inward supplies. So that reconciliation has to be done as per the books and as per the returns. So two kind of reconciliation you have to do. One is the reconciliation of outward supply with the reconciliation of the books and returns, and one is the reconciliation of your ITC as per the books and returns. So these are the two kinds of reconciliations I am required to do. So what are the steps you need to follow? First, you have to prepare a state level profit and loss account. So this will be done by the client, and you have to take a state level profit and loss account and certain balance sheet items like advances, wherein you require data at a state level. Then the reconciliation has to be done of the turnover as per the books and the return. So that of the turnover you have to do the reconciliation. Then next reconciliation is of the tax paid. Whatever taxes you have paid as per the books, whatever taxes are appearing, that so much is paid actually, but in the returns you have mentioned so much. So that reconciliation has to be done. Then the third reconciliation you have to do is on the ITC, whatever ITC you have taken in the books with the ITC as per the returns. So these are the three reconciliations you have to do in this step number 4. And step number 5 is that if there is any unreconciled item, there is an unreconciled item, and if any liability is there as per the auditor, then you have to tell the auditee to pay that liability. So that is the 5th step. So in the reconciliation statement, these 5 steps have to be followed, and it has to be drawn, the reconciliation statement. Now, what can be the reasons for differences? I am just highlighting those reasons. There can be various reasons. Basically, for the discharging GST liability, 1 minute. For discharging the GST liability, I have to follow the time of supply provisions. So GST has to be discharged based on the time of supply provisions. But accounting of the revenue recognition, etc., is done as per the accounting standards, your Ind AS accounting standards, etc. Therefore, there is a possibility that there will be the high possibility there is a difference in revenue recognition because of the accounting standards and the GST. Then there will be reconciliation differences. So one example is of the real estate construction industry. The construction industry under GST is a different methodology to pay GST. But accounting is done as per the AS7 or the Ind AS or relevant Ind AS, percentage completion method, etc. So different methods are given for construction contracts. So that kind of reconciliation will be there. Then in the books, I don't report transactions like stock transfers or cross charge of services or goods. So that is not that is not given in the financial statement. That effect will not be there because it is nullified, because all these are inter-company and inter-account entries. But in GST returns, that will be provided. So that kind of reconciliation will be there. Second reconciliation is commercial credit notes. So credit notes on which the GST impact is not taken. So that will not be reported in the GST return, but in the books that will be reported. So these differences are there. Then some employee recoveries or liquidated damages, etc. On this I have paid GST, but this will not be reported in the books. Unadjusted advances at the end of the financial year, basically for services. Now this is not accounted as a turnover in the books, but in the GST return it is included in the turnover. So there will be a difference. Then sale of capital goods. Now in the books I will only have profit. I will not have the sale value. That will not be as per the P&L. So that will be a difference, because in the GST I will pay GST on the sale value and not on the profit. So that kind of differences will be there when you are reconciling the books. So these are the few reasons for differences I have mentioned. Now I will go to the clause by clause analysis. Now earlier there were different columns. Before I start the form, there were different columns wherein I had to fill the differences. So I have to start the turnover as per the books. Then I have to add certain items which will be there in the GST returns, which as per GST tax is payable on that. That has to be added. Basically, that is the philosophy, and which is on which GST will not be there. Means no GST is applicable, but as per accounting, I have given I have done the account. I have reported the as per in the books. So that items has to be reduced. So whatever I have to start from the books turnover and reach the GST turnover. So from the books I have to start whatever additions on which GST is applicable will be added to the books turnover, and whatever items on which GST is not applicable, that will be reduced. So that all kind of reconciliation I have to do in the turnover. So that we are discussing part A of the GSTR 9C. Now in this first part is basic details, financial year, GST number, legal name treatment. These are all auto-populated details. Then I was talking about reconciliation of the turnover in the audited financial statement with the annual returns. So 5A is the turnover as per the books. So now if you are having multi-locational enterprises, then in that case, state level bifurcation has to be done. Only the whatever is pertaining to a particular state. Suppose Maharashtra, Gujarat, and MP, three states you have registration. So your total turnover has to be bifurcated between these three states in the books, and which is pertaining to the Maharashtra only has to be reported in 5A if you are filing the return for Maharashtra. Then you have to add certain transactions like unbilled revenue at the beginning of the financial year. Now, uh, 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 you are required to add this at the beginning. So whatever is unbilled. So what will be added is that means these are transactions on which GST was not discharged, and it was not reported in the current financial year. Effect was given in the last financial year. Example, rent. Now rent, what happens? Rent is from 15 to 15. So March return, 15 days you would have taken the effect in the books because you revenue recognition accounting standards prescribe that. But GST is paid only after the after the month. So GST is invoice is raised in the next financial year. So difference of 15 days will not be taken in the books of 18-19, which is already recorded in financial year 17-18. So that 15 days unbilled revenue will be added, which is at the at the beginning of the financial year. So accounting was done, but billing was not done, invoicing was not done, and therefore that will be added of the 15 days, like rent example. Then unadjusted advances at the end of the financial year, that will be added because it is not reported in the turnover. Then deemed supply. These are all stock transfer related things that will be added. Then credit note issued after the end of the financial year but reflected in the annual return. So effect is given in the annual return, but it is not recorded in the books because it is issued after the financial year. So that will be subtracted. Trade discounts accounted for in the audited financial year but not permissible under GST. So that for GST there is no deduction available as per section 15. You are not required to take a deduction of the discounts, but as per accounting you can take the deduction. So GST reduction was not possible, but for accounting you could have taken. So that will be added. Then turnover of April 19, this is for last financial year, so this is not relevant, but this field is not deleted. So that will still appear in this year. So that then unbilled revenue at the end of the financial year. So in whatever example of rent I gave, similar will happen in the end of the financial year also. Suppose at the end of the financial year, 15 days I have recorded in the books, but GST is not discharged, so that will be reduced. Unadjusted advances at the beginning of the financial year. There will be some unadjusted advances at the beginning of the financial year, that will be reduced. Same credit notes effect has to be given. Then it is regarding the adjustment on account of supply of goods by SEZ unit to DTA units. Now, as per the books of accounts, when a SEZ, this is for an SEZ unit, an SEZ unit will record it as a turnover. But for GST purposes, it will not discharge GST because it is considered to be an import of goods, and the DTA unit is required to file the bill of entry and discharge GST. So therefore, that is reduced. Then if I am under composition scheme for a particular period, then that turnover has to be reduced. Then adjustments in the turnover under section 15 and rules made there under. So now in this, there are certain adjustments like under section 15, which says that you have to add these items. Example is interest on delayed payment of consideration. So that is added in the value of the goods. So that will be added. That adjustment has to be done. So that will be added in the turnover. Then some foreign exchange fluctuation related differences will be there, because in the books that effect will be given, but in GST that effect will not be given. So that adjustments can be done here. And if it is not possible to do give any bifurcations, which is specifically mentioned in all the above table, then there is a residuary category O, in which you can put all the differences. So that reconciliation has to be done. Then the turnover will be calculated and reported in Q, and P will be auto-populated from your annual return. So that turnover will be taken from your annual return, and if there is any difference in the turnover, then reasons have to be given that this is a difference, and this is a reason why the turnover is unreconciled. Now, relaxation given is that you need not give any bifurcation of all this. You just have to put 5A and B, C, D, all this data directly you can put in. That relaxation is given for financial year 17, 18 and 18, 19. So that relaxation is there. So you need not give a specific breakups. You can directly put whatever is the difference here. And then when the department comes, you can give that explanation, keep on giving the explanation at that time. So that was about the total gross turnover. Now reconciliation of the taxable turnover. So in this, whatever is the value of exempt supply, zero rated supply without payment of tax, supplies on which tax is to be paid by reverse recipient under reverse charge. So all this will be deducted, and then that comparison will happen. If there is any unreconciled difference, then that reasons have to be given for that also. And then this is reconciliation of tax paid. So whatever tax is paid as per the books and as per the return. So that reconciliation of tax paid has to be given rate wise. So that reconciliation also has to be given in part 3 of the schedule, GSTR 9C. If there is any additional tax because of the unreconciled items, then that tax has to be paid, and whatever amount is payable and not paid has to be reported by the auditor here in table number 11. So this was about the output tax liability differences. So major thing which we should consider is whatever is the turnover as per the books has to be compared with the annual return, and whatever is the difference has to be reported, and auditor has to say because of this unreconciled item some tax liabilities has to be discharged by the assessee or not. That has to be seen. Now reconciliation of the ITC. Now what is this reconciliation of ITC? Whatever ITC as per books is there, that will be reconciled with the return. So now in this case it is possible that certain ITC is booked in the current financial year, but it is in the books, but in the returns it is claimed in the next financial year. So that will be added, because in the books it is what I say, it is so it will be reduced. Sorry, because in the books it is recorded, but in the returns it is not taken. So that will be reduced. That will be reported in 12C. But if it is booked in the earlier financial year and claimed in the current financial year, it was booked in the previous financial year, I have claimed in the current financial year, that will be added. So there is no difference. So that has to be reconciled with the annual return. So that put adjustments of the ITC has to be done in this. Then there are certain adjustments which are regarding Tran 1 credits. So if Tran 1 credits are taken during the 17-18, then that has to be reported in the B, ITC booked in the current earlier financial year but claimed in current financial year. So that will be under 12B. Or some reversals are given effect, then that also has to be reversed. So that all those effects have to be given in 12B and C. And then I have to reconcile with the 9, that is ITC as per GSTR 9. And if there is reasons for the unreconciled differences of ITC, then that reasons have to be given here. And if there is some tax liability because of this unreconciled difference, I am required to pay some tax, then auditor has to recommend that also in this table 14. Then table numbers, I think 16 is there for that, not table. 14 is something very unique. In 14, earlier you had to give all the breakup of all your expenses at a state level, whatever is the value and whatever is the ITC related to that you have taken. So all the breakup you have to give of all the expenses at a state level, and therefore this was a very Herculean task to be given, but now this has been made optional. And for the financial year 17-18, this is not required to be 18-19, it is not required. Then this is the auditor recommendation that whatever tax liability has to be paid due to non-reconciliation, that has to be provided. Then the verification column, that you have verified all the information, that information is given. These are all the fields which are optional. So I have mentioned this. that these all tables are optional, so you can refer to that. So this is about the 9 and 9C. There are certain things which I would recommend as a fresh article. You should, as also the experience articles if they have, then they can also see this, that whenever you go to do an audit, that you should understand the client's business and you should understand the business at a transaction level, because GST is a transaction based tax and you should know all the business transactions of the company, because GST implications are on each and every transaction. So therefore you should understand the business of the client first and not go and manually do the work, that I am just doing the compilation. No, you have to understand the business, you have to understand the business transaction and see to it that the GST impact analysis is done on each and every transaction, and GST analysis of GST applicability on each and every transaction, business transaction is seen. That is, and you have to see transactions which are not reported in the books also, because under GST, supply without consideration is an important concept. So what of the book items also, there are certain transactions on which GST liabilities are there. So that also needs to be seen. Then breaking up of the financial level, GST level, that needs to be done. Then there are certain amendments happening or some advanced rulings or some judgments which are coming on the courts, and that also needs to be seen whether we have any impact or we can take any advantage of, our client can take any advantage or some position. So that also needs to be read constantly when you are in GST, doing GST work. Then you have to prepare a proper checklist, documentation, and management representation letter. Then at again a state level versus entity level, I would suggest at an entity level you should do it. And if it is not possible, state level also can be done. But break up in the one single engagement letter or a checklist, that can be done. So that is a good practice. You should have a detailed checklist, detailed MRL, management representation letter, and proper documentation you should do of all the things you have verified. So that your audit program should be such. The institute has come out with CA Institute has come out with a technical guide wherein the sample checklist, documentation, MRL is available. You can check the institute website. There it is available. Indirect tax committee of the ICA. So you can go there and see all these material. Then some review of the returns, some positions have been taken which you according to it is not correct, or some ITC has to be reversed, but apparently you find it is not done. So then you can recommend that. So that also you can do. So what are the checklist? What you should keep in your file? Basically, all your registration certificates, list of goods, services, their HSN codes, rates applied, audited report should be there, tax audit report, transfer pricing audit report, the earlier financial year GST annual return and audit report, some impact analysis report which the client has done, that also needs to be there. Some litigation assessments or some audit letters which the client has received, that needs to be seen. So that all should be there in your file. Then all the compliances related workflows, so all the returns, etc., all the copies needs to be there. And you should call for the copies from April to September. So next 6 months also returns, if some workings. So you should not call the return copy also as per the also the supporting workings which the client has done, because in the returns all the figures are given at a consolidated level. So you don't have a bifurcation year wise. So the supporting workings also you should call from the clients and get that in your document list. So other income details, all sample invoices should be there. Some tax clauses of the contracts needs to be seen. Then aging reports, state-wise profit and loss account. This is important. You should download all the electronic credit ledgers and cash ledgers from the GSTN portal. So that needs to be seen. And also, if there is some comparison on the due dates, when the client has was required to file the return and when he has actually paid, actually filed the return. So if there is some interest liabilities, then that also needs to be computed. So all this needs to be there. So these are the areas where you need to focus. So this I have mentioned over here. So you can go through those areas. This is whatever I have discussed during the session only that I have put down here. So you can go through all these areas where you need to check. Last slide is on the technical glitches. That there are certain technical glitches you might face when you're filing the 9C. So 9C is an offline utility, so that offline you have to do. So you have to fill the data offline only, offline through the utility. So whenever the figures related to 9 are put in the 9C, then paisa to paisa it should be, there should not there should be paisa to paisa matching. So there cannot be difference of a single paisa only. Otherwise, when you upload the GSTR 9C, then there will be an error. So that care has to be taken. Again, when you are filling the membership number of the auditor, the zero need not be put. So if some zero at the initial set, the 0411765, something like that. So in that case, there are certain chartered accountants who are having a zero, means 6-digit numbers are now existing, but there are certain old chartered accountants, so they have a 5-digit number. So before that they put a zero, but GST return you need not put any zero before that number. So only 5-digit number, then 5-digit. No zero should be mentioned. Then the PAN of the auditor, which is who is filing the this should be matched with the DSC. You should have a DSC of the auditor, so that is mandatory. And in case there is no observation in the part B, that is the certificate we are mentioning, so in that nil has to be filed. And you need to download the EM signer from the GST portal, and you have to run it first as an administrator. So that all the technical glitches and the precautions that you should take is discussed in this. So I think this is what from my end. If anyone has any questions, then I can take it up now. So this was a big session. So if someone has any question, then I'm ready to take it up now. Yes, Charmi or Vitang.
As of now, we can't see any questions being typed by anyone.
Okay.
If any participant has any questions, they can just raise their hands so that accordingly we can.
So many participants had raised their hands during the session. I could see.
Okay. If I may request once again, if you can raise your hands or post your query.